Okay then. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, ambassador, Mr. Minister. It's my pleasure to start this event. This is part of Vidzeme University of Applied Science Scientific Conference. And this part of conference is related to project Baltic 100. We will discuss today, not discuss, we will celebrate achievement of this project. My name is Gatis Krūmiņš. I am a researcher at Vidzeme University, and I will be here in different responsibilities. You will see me in different responsibilities. But first, I will give floor to our Minister of Economics, Mr. Viktors Valainis, for the introduction speech. Yeah, some words about this. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, colleagues. This is a big pleasure for me to be here today and discuss with the scientists about GDP in the longer term. And this is very important for us, and especially when economy is getting in the first rows in our society and in politics as well. Because some years ago, there was many different topics in our political schedule, but there was not topics about economic development. But today we can see the scientists are making research about GDP in the past. There is communities, business communities, which are having discussions about what we will do in the close future, what we will do in the further future. There is a Bank of Latvia who is discussing and giving their approach about economic development for the future. And of course, there is the Ministry of Economy who will present our view about economic development, first time in Latvian history in Parliament, and it will be full debates in Parliament for one day about economic development. And we will represent our view and our plan for the next year and for the midterm period about where we are moving, what is our goals, where we will focus, and what do we want to reach. And of course, everybody wants to reach bigger GDP growth, but we have to remember past, and that's why this is a very serious conference today when we are looking at the past achievements, and we can see into those years where we had higher achievements, what comes next. So when we are going to this higher GDP growth, and we are doing the same, we want to make it higher. This year we'll see how it will end. 2%. I am still sitting on 3%, so I'm making this goal. Let's go for 3. Still doing it, and I hope our business industries and communities will make it happen. At least we will finish this year with 2+. We'll see how it will be next year, but we are going to reach 5% for the longer period to reach our main goal to double our economy in the next 10 years. So this is, and everybody has to join to this work to make it happen. But while we are doing it, we can't make the same mistakes which our previous colleagues did when they were going in that kind of fast direction as well. And there we know what kind of mistakes they did, and we have to learn from the past we can't afford to make mistakes. And that's why this conference is so important, and I'm very glad to be here, and it will be very interesting for me as well to hear scientists, their view about our past, and to help us to make our future. Thank you, and wish you a good conference.
Thank you very much. Now we will continue with presentation. We will present the main achievements of our project, and I will start with just general introduction. Then my colleagues Kaspars Osis, will show us where to find the results of this, because to publish somewhere some scientific publications, it is of course important, but we really looked at this project like we really were focused to broader society. And then maybe it's this Adomas Klimantas presentation, most interesting part for the general public, because Adomas will go deeper in this GDP aspects, yeah, because Adomas, and I'm really glad to say that really young generation of researchers from Baltic States, yeah, already have such kind of achievements. And yes, why we did this and how it happened, yeah, it happened 3.5 years ago, when Zenonas Norkus, yeah, called me and said, Gatis, let's try something interesting for our history. Let's try to calculate GDP and create some database, and so. And we did this in the last 3 years, 4 institutions, from 4 countries. Very different, in size, so very interesting ecosystem. 2 largest research universities, Tartu University, Vilnius University, Advanced School of Economics from Norway, and then pretty small, but no less ambitious like others, Vidzeme University of Applied Science. We spent €1 million in 3 years, and for this I should thank you for our sponsors, so it's really important, because it costs something, If you have some expectations from scientists, you should pay them, and this is a very good example how 3 institutions from Baltics and plus Norway, what we did together, because we had very different fields of expertise, Some of them of us more in sources, some of economic, and accounting, some of them in technologies, and then expertise, of course, because Norway already did the estimation of GDP of last 200 years, and so very different institutions, And so what kind of data and what we prepared in general, we focused to 3 areas, Demography, then economics and GDP, and then agriculture. What is added value from this? That you can use data we collected not only in national but in the regional level. And what is that unique feature of our project, that you can use all kind of data already in current regions of Baltic States, status 2020. So if, for example, you look to Latgal region, Latvia, you can look 100 years back and learn, from some historical, events, what happened in history, You can learn a lot of you have a lot of that about this region, And so we focus to this demography, agriculture, and economics, and this GDP. Of course, this was the biggest challenge, because nobody did this before. And just one example, what you can learn, the same Latgal region, number of pigs, And you from this number of statistics about number of pigs on this current region of Latvia, you can look to this and you can see different periods of history, when it rised, last in 30s, Then we see how much Latgal was involved in this policy of Soviet economics, and what happened after that. Of course, that is interesting. Okay, Latgal is one region. You can compare, 2 regions in 100 years. Latgal and Vidzeme, 2 very different, but they are different. You see, maybe more or less the same trends in 2030, but then you see already this rise, So Latgal was more involved in the Soviet economy policy, so the number of pigs in Latgal rise more than in Vidzeme. And then, of course, we see what happened in last decades. So this is, of course, not only this interesting. Of course, from one country, we can look to different countries. This is, for example, the same pigs, but Latvia, Estonia, and we can look and we see some trends. Now already from this you can tell your history not only about agriculture, not only about one country, but about some general situation, And here we can explain a lot of things what happened, When you raised this, in Soviet times, with imported food, for pigs, what happened after, With this integration. So really very interesting different things. And maybe what I learned, I learned one thing from this, how different was our region in last, we can say not only 100 years, but from beginning of 20th century from other regions. Just one example, if we look at this critical mass of population, in countries, number of population Norway. What to write about this? Pretty boring, Okay, take another one, Scandinavian country, Finland, north of us, More or less the same trend, we see First World War, something happening, of course, Second World War, and so, but more or less the same, okay? Denmark, and if we include all of them, yes, we see it's this more or less the same trend. Then we can include one other country, there are some ideas, number of population, this one graph. Your demography, and you see how different was situation in different countries, and in 100 years, What was this general trend in Scandinavia, And if we look here, we can just construct some theoretical models that without some geopolitical situations, what we had in the previous century, yeah, this turbulence of geopolitical events, yeah, 2 wars, yeah, Soviet model, that theoretically it was possible that we have now about 5-6 million inhabitants here. What? Ah, yeah, okay, yeah. Here in Latvia. So it's just what we can learn from history, and this is if we compare like 2 regions, yeah, with more or less the same number of population, so Finland, Denmark, Norway, yeah, and this is 3 Baltic States, yeah, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. We see how different trends, yeah, and what kind of critical mass we have here, yeah. But despite of this, of course, we're growing, yeah, and so this is just 2 examples what we can learn, yeah, from looking to history, yeah, to different graphs and all kind of information. Of course, you will receive in this database, yeah. And please, Kaspars, come here and show something about our database, yeah. Yeah. Please. Thank you. Make this.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good afternoon, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be here. My name is Kaspars Osis. I do represent Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences. And I'm happy to be part of this project. Even though I'm coming from the STEM area, from IT in particular, it was so interesting to be part of it. And I wonder why it's not full screen, but I see full screen over here. But anyways, we can get the information from what's displayed there. And I would like to stop by the data part. We have experts in economics and history, etc. But how about the data? And if we dive into thinking about this aspect, 100 years of span of several countries of history, and how the data is being gathered. Is it gathered or not? Where it's saved? In what format? Is it saved? Is it maybe discontinued for whatever reason, wars, etc.? So researchers in the project had quite a bit of challenge to find the data, to see if it's available, to see if it has its integrity, and so on and so on. And also, of course, it goes along with the aspect of how we are dealing then with technologies. So we have to put in all together in one piece. We have to come up with the acquisition plan in order not to forget something, in order to double check that everything is gathered, everything is glued together in a correct way. In order to do this, we actually subdivided the approach in several steps. We subdivided the old data in more than 30 data series. We agreed on several of them, then subdivided within 3 Baltic countries, and further on in 4 time periods: interwar, World War II period, and Soviet occupation period, and the post period of Soviet occupation, meaning the restoration of our independence time. And in addition to this, we also came with a process how we could double check that from the data which is available, we get most of it, meaning that we can get the data, because we have to realize that not all data is digital. Somewhere it is in analog format. Not always the data is available in archives, so we have to think outside of box. And then we have to come together and try to have a common format, a common way of recording the entries and so on. In order to do this, we came up also with several roles in the process of data acquisition. We came up with additional categories, 3 major categories for demography, for GDP calculations, and for agriculture, and then with following subcategories. We will see down the road once I'm going to show the data catalog and database afterwards. And also naming convention, so we can easy and in a very clear-cut way locate data and rely on it, basically. Then this is what we came up with in terms of a data acquisition process. We sort on it and developed certain circles to double check if we do have all the data, if it's available at all, maybe it is not. What do we do with them? Do we have data in content-wise correctly acquired? Do we have technically correctly acquired? Do we have it correctly migrated into database, and so on? And afterwards, we have to think about the staging. So where do we stage the data? So we have developed the database using Oracle Apex solution. And this is available also online as we can say as a large sandbox with real data. And afterwards, on top of that, we have also prepared a data catalog online, which is available in the address of baltic100.va.lv. And sorry, Gatis, I have to correct it, not www, but without www. Otherwise, we will end up of page not found.
I'm historian.
Yeah, that's fine. Just double checking so that we don't having any surprises there. Okay, let me see. So, and as Gatis mentioned, the example of agriculture data series, in particular livestock and pigs in particular. So also then I will try to go on with this example. So we can go for the web address baltic100.va.lv. We can use both desktops and mobile devices to reach this address. And there we have 2 ways to reach the data. There's some additional sources, like for example the sources altogether we have used in the 3 countries, some description about the project, and in some general views regarding these 3 major categories. And also a link towards the database, which I'm going to touch in a second. So, and then how we can get to the data sets. Altogether, we have, if I'm not mistaken, 34 data series per 3 countries, altogether 102 data sets. So we have 2 options. Either we can go and use a datasets link where we have the full list. We can use also the search possibility of a browser built in, and then we do have option to go for 2 types of datasets, either CSV or either XLS, whichever is more convenient for particular research or interest in particular data. And the other option is if we would like to be more fine-tuned, then we can go and follow the data categories we have came up with. And so we have 2 subcategories over here regarding the demography data. For example, okay, let's say demography is specific data, and we have just all the data sets regarding demography specific data. So it's much more fine-tuned, plus we have some color coding on side so that we can easily see where we are in a data catalog and locate ourselves quite easily, understand what kind of data set we are looking at in particular moment of time. And as I mentioned, in addition to this, so we can go, for example, with the pigs example. In this example, it's actually agricultural data. So we go to agriculture, we go to livestock, and I already see the pigs. So, and we can, for example, download the CSV or .xls file. For example, on our machines, if the researcher decides so to do. And and to work further on with the most familiar tool he or she uses for data analytics. For example, I have prepared a small example of using Microsoft Power BI, and I have imported all these 3 data sets, and just a simple example, for example, of a line chart where we can work on, go in more details, for example, zoom in some year in particular to see more fine-tuned data. That's one option. But if we are not maybe quite into research, or we just would like to see some listing of data, maybe some quick overview, then there's also another possibility. We can go to our About project place, and we can skip to project database, which I mentioned is as a sandbox, so what real data will be there. So we can log in. Once we have logged in, for example, I can also do it right now. So I have the nice and live session working there. So, we can do the same exactly process. So let's see where's our data series regarding this in particular. So actually I have also opened for us so we can save some time here. So we have our peaks, for example, for Latvia. We can have a nice overview. We can also have a research perspective. Like I have opened up a nice chart for 3 countries. Maybe I can just pick on one to see more fine-tuned information just about 2 of them, etc. Plus, if somebody, he or she wishes, we can also have some advanced possibilities of filtering, charting, and so on. So that's in short about a data perspective from my side. I would give floor next to our colleague Adomas. Thank you very much. And Adomas, please.
Yes, thank you, Kaspar. So you see, we are really serious scientists. Yeah, so not only statistics and Minister of Economics. If you have some problems, just let us know. Yeah, we not only will take all kind of calculations, but prepare database, everything. Yeah, Adomas, please, floor is yours. Yeah, GDP.
Let's see if it works. Yes, it works. Hello all. I'm a little bit nervous with such a distinguished audience, but I hope I'll do fine. So I will tell you about the economic progress of the Baltic States since 1918 or 1919, where our data sets start. And I will try to help answering a question whether Baltic States are in the end success stories of Nordic scale or perhaps Eastern European failures. How many of you think that Baltic States belong to Eastern Europe? Raise your hands. Okay, I see one hand. Who would rather assign them to Northern Europe? Nice. Well, there's a reason for that. Nobody wants to be part of Eastern Europe because, according to economic historians, we're talking about history, not today, it is a region of reproduced backwardness. Many of the countries in Eastern or East Central Europe used to be poor before the First World War, poor after the First World War, poor after the Great Depression, poor after the Second World War, and only in the last decades have they started catching up. The Nordics, on the other hand, have been successful all the way 200 years, or even more maybe. So nobody wants to be part of that. But we've only seen the positive developments in the Baltic States for the last 27 years because we don't have any data before that. And the political history seems to coincide with Eastern Europe much more. The population losses, the wartime devastation and everything seems to be better fitting for us to be part of Eastern Europe. So now that we have 100 years of economic growth data, we will be able to more firmly answer the question, where do the Baltic states belong? So about myself, I am a doctoral student at the University of Oxford since 2018, so almost 6 years now. I've been working on the long-run economic statistics of the Baltic states. And besides that, I'm also a cartographer. That's my second job. I'm creating maps. So if anybody interested in that, we can talk about it later. You may ask, first of all, why GDP? There's always this question. GDP doesn't show economic inequality, and that's true. But to be fair, for most normal average countries, an increase in income per capita, which translates to general living standards, leads to usually an increase in perceived life quality. People seem happier when they have more money in normal countries. We're not talking about Africa, we're not talking about Middle East with all the oil, we're talking about average countries like Lithuania, Latvia, France, Germany. The more income you have, the happier you get, which means GDP is a decent indicator of life quality. So that's why we chose it as the primary indicator to start analyzing Baltic States' economic history. And the issue was that there was no reliable data before 1995. We know that the Baltic States have been successful so far, but has this success been reproduced for 100 years, periods of these 100 years? Or is it just a modern phenomenon? We didn't know that. And the Baltic 100 project allowed us to answer that. So what we did, and if anybody is interested in the details of gathering this data, come tomorrow to Valmiera. But today I will not bother you with that. What we did, we assembled enormous amounts of data. We created a new series of GDP per capita from 1919 to 1995, and we anchored to the existing series to obtain fully comparable 100 years of GDP per capita figures. Right, so what do we have? I aggregated the Baltic States, the Nordics, and the EU for about the whole 100 years into average series. Interestingly enough, it seems like our growth has been more or less similar in the periods of prosperity and calm in the geopolitical stage. The issue is that both the First World War, Second World War, and the post-communist transition, and even the 2008 crisis was much more pronounced in the Baltic States than in the rest of Europe, or indeed in the Nordics, which leads us to think that our growth potential seems to have been fine, is that the geopolitical circumstances constantly reduced our ability to grow. So in this graph shows the percentage of European Union as we have it today, plus including the UK. So this is the threshold that people are comparing every country in European Union these days. How far are we still behind the European average? So this shows how far we have been from the European average throughout the 100 years, and it compares the Baltics and East Central Europe without Yugoslavia, so countries like Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Czechia, Slovakia, and before Czechoslovakia. So what's interesting is that we had 4 periods of exceptional strive to achieve these Western standards, to converge towards the West. We tried to reach for them. First of all, before the First World War, it was almost 70% of, like 65% of EU level. Then it dropped again. Then, after the Great Depression, we seem to be catching up well. We almost reached 70% of EU level, and then bang, another war. Then, during the Soviet occupation, I will talk about that data a little bit more, why it's not directly translatable to living standards, but in general, growth was robust, at least until the 1970s, and then again, all growth in the socialist area stops, the Western countries grow, and therefore we see that the Baltic states are declining relative to the EU levels, and only in the last decades we see that the trend has been reversed for the good, contrary to East Central Europe, which seems to have not been approaching EU levels at all until the last decades. So let's look at the interwar first. Between the First and Second World War, there are romantic stories about Latvia, about Estonia, about Lithuania, how prosperous that period was, how much we were able to achieve. The thing is that it's not universal for all the Baltic countries. For Latvia and particularly Estonia, the interwar period was a golden age for sure. These countries were able to approach the European levels. Latvia was the most successful. It had reached 90% of European Union's level in 1938, and this level has not been reached even today by any of the Baltic states, which means that Latvia and Estonia as well were more westernized in the interwar period than they are today in terms of GDP per capita, incomes per capita. And what makes it a success story in general is the sound policies, economic policy making that was done during the interwar period by Latvia and Estonia, not Lithuania, in their ability to foster and keep trade levels high. So what happened is that after the crisis, 1929, the biggest economic crisis in the world, Latvia and Estonia quickly abandoned the gold standard. They decided to attach their currencies to pound sterling, which was a floating currency, and therefore keep trade levels high with their main trading partner, which was the UK. Lithuania did not do that, and therefore our levels of trade have not seen any of the levels that the Latvians and Estonians saw. In Estonia, because they devalued their currency fastest, trade levels recovered until 1938, even though in the whole world the trade was still very, very low after the crisis. So this is a short example of how a small country can achieve good results in international stage when all of the world seems to be approaching World War II, closing down and everything, and it seems like all of the decisions are made by the big ones. Latvia and Estonia managed to push through the crisis and achieve significant results during the interwar period through sound policies. Interwar modernization was another issue. We all like to talk about how Latvia invented their radios, how Estonia invented their phones. Lithuania wasn't as good in that sense. The thing is that there are things to be proud of, but there's also things to keep in mind. First, industry was the fastest growing sector during the interwar period for all the Baltic states. That is true. But the thing is that most of the population still worked in the agricultural sector. And therefore, the progress that we saw within the industrial sector did not translate into exponential growth of living standards on average. For example, number of tractors per million hectares in all of the 3 Baltic countries was way lower than countries like UK, which were industrialized. So, which means that our most important sector, agriculture, was still rather backward compared to the rest of Europe. And for the rest of the population, a good indicator besides GDP is also electrical power generation. Still, per capita, it was very, very low. But again, you can see that Lithuania is way lower than Latvia and Estonia. So in terms of countries east of Germany, Latvia and Estonia are absolute success stories in the interwar period. In terms of the whole Europe, they're one of the better ones. Now, occupation period, again, data issues tomorrow if anybody is interested, but now we can safely assume that this data is robust enough. So what we have is that during the first decades of occupation period, there truly was quite rapid growth. First of all, the first part of that growth was facilitated by the recovery from the Second World War. That is usual when you have incomes down, devastation and everything. Usually economy picks up pretty fast, and because collectivization was not started to be implemented until 1948-49, there was a rapid growth before that period. Once collectivization measures were in place, growth stagnated, stopped. In Lithuania almost completely, in Estonia as well, in Latvia somewhat less, because more of the country's population was living not from agriculture but from other sources. But in general, up until Khrushchev's new measures of regional economic planning, there was stagnation in income levels. They only started to rapidly rise during Khrushchev's industrialization policies, which allowed the Baltic states to somewhat keep their autonomy and decide on the growth measures themselves. So until 1975, all the Baltic states have surpassed the USSR's average levels, and they seem to be approaching European levels again. Now, why does it then translate to living standards is another issue, because a lot of the productivity that the Baltic peoples managed to achieve was sent through forcibly to the Soviet Union. So when I say the Baltic states reached 80% of EU level in 1975, it does not mean that they lived 75% as good as the average European. Is the productivity of the Baltic workers was that high. Now, what happens after 1975 is the complete stagnation of the whole Soviet bloc, and that includes the Baltic states as well. There is almost no growth in any of the countries during the last decades. And what is interesting is that previous figures seem to be reporting that in 1989 there was a jump in Estonian incomes, a jump in Latvian incomes even in 1990, and Lithuanians too. What the new data shows is that the last year of positive growth, even though that's negligible, in Latvia was in 1986. Since 1986, the economy was going progressively downward. And that plunged, of course, into the post-Soviet transition crisis. While Lithuania seems to be still growing, probably is explained by the massive investments into the nuclear power plant and the oil refinery. Now, I like this slide the most. So this one compares the official Soviet measures in constant price rubles to the newly acquired data in industrial production, but it's kind of the same in the overall growth as well. The red line is the one reported in Soviet rubles, seems to be almost exponentially higher than the new data we calculated, which gives you a clear measure of how inflated due to propaganda were the Soviet official measures, and why you should always at least divide them by 2, if not more, if you want to see anything closer to reality. So, to end this presentation, I think we can distinguish 4 different periods of Baltic economic history, which will allow us to determine where we should place them geographically. In the interwar period, the Baltic states were growing fast, especially after the Great Depression crisis, even surpassed the growth rates of the Nordic countries, while East Central Europe was still plunging down and couldn't even recover. Up until 1938, their average growth was negative. Now, during the first part of the Cold War, again, the Baltic states seems to be almost similar to the rest of the regions we are comparing with, but still showing the best growth rates of them all. Then during the Soviet stagnation, of course, the West picks up way faster than the Baltic states, but still the Baltic states managed to outpace the rest of East Central Europe, which was somewhat half independent. And during the last years, we are analyzing the current period, again, happily, of course, we are converging towards EU levels on similar pace than East Central Europe. But what does this show is that absolutely the Baltic states should not be treated as part of East Central Europe, but they should also not be placed as part of Northern Europe. What I argue, and I will argue in my thesis next year, is that the Baltic states are unique and they should be analyzed as a unique, small, compact period of countries which through all their existence, all since 1918, managed to go through incredible hardships and still keep pushing towards the European level, which hasn't been possible for any other post-socialist country. So we should congratulate ourselves. We are kind of unique. Thank you.
Adomas Klimantas, please remember this name, and if it's possible, take some selfies with him, because I really believe if he will continue to be scientist, he will receive Nobel Prize. If he will go to business, then he will be billionaire. So yes, please try to do. I already did some with you. So yeah, yes. Mr. Minister, do you have some minutes time for some feedback here? To comment something, and then I know you should run to our parliament. Maybe already you have no information. You say, no, everything will be completely different in our next decade, what we will plan in Latvia. Please.
Yes, I think the last presentation was quite impressive, and about that, and this comes with my mind as well, about that Baltics is specific. And we have to cooperate between all the Baltic states together. And if we want to speak about our economy growth, is best way how to succeed result is to speak about the Baltic economy growth. And when we are searching for the new partnerships, if we are thinking about cooperation between new markets, I'm not talking about EU single market, I'm talking about new markets like Australia. There we go, the Baltics, and this is our economic environment, and we have to think in Baltic level to succeed better our own levels. So this is quite good result, which what happens in my mind is now I can see the scientists are giving the same result, and I think this is goal where we have to stay in this line, and to understand that we are unique, and we don't have to. We have to reach our own goals, but we have to remember that our situation is unique, and we have to cooperate more and more closely between Baltic states, and this is very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, now we will continue with panel discussion. We now should take some break of about 3 minutes to preparation this, yeah. And discussion, moderator will be Pauls Raucep, yeah, Latvian journalist. I will give floor to him. And Pauls, he started his life in the US. By the way, you have a degree in Harvard in history, so he is pretty advanced in history. And what else? Yes, maybe your family name Raucep means something for Estonians, yeah. So your roots maybe are not only in Latvia, but maybe in other, yeah. Maybe, yeah. It's so okay. 3 minutes break, and then yes, and then yeah. Thank you for everyone, yeah, and we will continue with discussion.
I think we're going to start the second part of this presentation. I hope everybody returns with their coffee and comes on. Thank you, Gatis, for introducing me as an example of Latvian-Estonian integration. That's very important in our part of the world, to be able to cooperate and develop. My job here is to run this panel where we'll be discussing the results of this research. Thank you very much, Adomas. That was a really fascinating presentation. Every slide I was going, wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to have to get into that database and look around. But in addition to Adomas and Gatis, who we already know, the panel will have Olu Griten, who is a professor of economic history at the Norwegian School of Economics, who also participated in this study. Welcome. Ojārs Kēkris, who is the president of the Latvian Economist Association and a former minister of economics in Latvia. And Jurdis Miezainis, and he's the parliamentary secretary of the Ministry of Economics. And we will now launch this discussion of what we have learned. And I just think it's so important that we now have this information, because I think for many of us are in Latvia certainly, and I expect in Estonia and Lithuania as well, our sense of economic history has often been based on kind of mythical ideas about the past. Adomas already mentioned the golden age between the wars, but I think also this idea of very agrarian countries in Latvia. There's a famous book called Straumēni by a famous Latvian author called Edvards Virza, who I think has really defined what Latvians think about how their economy was and should be. We have these stories about exports of butter and bacon during the 30s as being the basis of our economic development. And of course also our idea about what happened during the Soviet period. And you can't really, but I think you can't really talk about economics unless you have data. Data is the basis of economics and of economic history, and now we have that data, we have that core, that backbone of information that allows us to really look at what actually happened and to develop further our research and our understanding of the past, without which we really can't understand what the future will be like. Now, I want to start with the people who are not involved in this study, or who haven't, who haven't spoken yet, and ask them what, in learning about this and hearing Adomas' presentation or about participating in the study, what was new that you found? What was surprising? What were the things that you thought, oh, this is something that really, if I tell people this, they'll go, ah, that's something unusual. And I think I'll start with Ojārs Kēkris, because I think he's been thinking about the Latvian economy now for 30 years or more.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Gatis, thank you, Adomas, and Kaspars for your research and presentation today, and as well, thanks for inviting me. And of course, the topic that you Rolf mentioned, GDP, it's three letters. And I remember first, and that time, if the surprises are coming, year 1992, 93. That time, I was a chairman of economic committee of our parliament, later the minister of economics, as you mentioned. But of course, everyone in other countries that we have possibility to meet are talking about the GDP. But actually, we don't know what is Latvia's GDP at that time. And so I remember that I asked our, I think the correct name is Central Statistics Committee and the main statistics authority, and ask them, okay, we can do something about that and figure out what is our GDP is. Okay, we not succeed at all. But I have one name that I would like to mention, and he is my guru in GDP. And his name is Ardo Hansson. I not yet met Estonians, and probably he is still active in Estonian politics. But yes, Ardo...
He's the advisor to the Prime Minister.
Oh, really? Still? Okay, great. Because that time, I think he's a few years younger than me. He is Estonian, you correct me if I'm wrong, Estonian, American-born Estonian. and with a PhD from Harvard. And he's not official advisor to me or to our government, but he is advisor at that time definitely to Estonian government, to Matlar, and as well the central Eesti Bank board member. Probably later he became as well the president of Eesti Bank. And we quite easily, after a few discussions with our statistics authority, on year 93, I have our GDP figures on my table. Just yesterday, I looked to the OECD statistics. That, for me, it's more trustful source for GDP. And I found out that for Estonia, the first year where it's available, it's 93. For Lithuania and Latvia, it's 95. I don't know, is it your research changed something in this? Maybe not, because we are not official countries we occupied that time. And after, I remember the Gatis 3 years ago, when I think you tell me about this, your idea to count GDP. We in some projects, some before. And I'm very happy that you are ready to do it, but I think I remember as well, I am quite skeptical. Because I think I asked you a few questions that time. How you can compare the prices in market economy and in Soviet command economy? Well, and as well, how you can disintegrate the data from, because in Soviet times, a lot of data, especially military, aggregated in all Soviet Union. It's no data separate for Latvia. How you can do that? Honestly, I not heard anything more than I know at that time. It's why I'm skeptical. But really, my congratulations to you and as well to team that you bring together from both universities and from institute from Norway. And you did an excellent job. And maybe I must say that I am not, yes, let's say, I must say that not all probably have access to these 10 conclusions, because you sent me, I think, to all panel, you sent the 10 conclusions of this work. But actually it's presented today as well. And I like these all 10 conclusions, because I like, and it's a surprise, maybe not, but that it is exactly or very near what my grandma and my father used to tell me. My grandmother, you can expect, she was born quite a long time ago, and she used to tell me, oh yes, you know, before World War, our economy on the level of Finland. And that exactly that I see in your data. As well, my father, he used to be a journalist in sports. And he covers the ice hockey, and ice hockey always is important for Latvia. And he have a possibility to be to cover ice hockey from Prague. At that time, Czechoslovakia. And he went to Prague, and he told me, you know, they are working same as we, more or less, but they live much better. And as well, it's in your conclusions that our economy is very similar. It's 75, 80s, that years. But for distribution, we have much less wealth. And then he went to Helsinki, that as well, ice hockey capital. And he said, okay, they're working maybe a little better, but they live much better even than Czechs and Slovaks that time. And as well, this is in this research. Because that time, you know, many in auditorium know it very well, but maybe not young generation, yes, that, you know, officially, and I am product of our school system in Soviet time and as well University of Latvia. And we teach that, you know, the Soviet system brings us the industrialization, the Soviet system bring us to teach us how to print the newspapers and even to play theaters. And for that we must be grateful and bring all good meat and milk to St. Petersburg, that time it's Leningrad, or and Moscow. I don't know, Ralph, if I can continue, I have a few more points, but you stop me if I'm talking too much. As well, I am very much agreed with conclusion point number 7. You touch it in your presentation. This is that economic slowdown. It's not reason 90s. It's economic slowdown in Soviet Union and as well in Baltics, at least from 86. And this is finally the technology advances in the market economy played the role, and Soviet Union not capable more to compete. Even that time, I have, I trust these rumors that after this, it's as well in the newspaper, that in Andropov's time, it's 92, I think, Soviet Union, under his leadership, gave to 10 basic research centers in Soviet Union, including Akademia Sibirskih Nauk and Moscow University, someone more, Plekhanov Institute, and very shortly, this question, what to do, because we are losing the Soviet Union, I mean. And actually, the short answer is, or we must start a war in next 10 years, or we must completely change, the economy, at least the model that Khrushchev did. And that is the reason. And of course, only 90s, that is but this is different story.
Thank you, Ayers. I was moving on to Ola. We're all here from the Baltic region talking about our own little things. You're from Norway. You helped fund this, which we're very grateful for, but you're also involved in designing this project so far. What surprised you about what you learned about the Baltic States or from the economic history of this? And what were the specific challenges compared to maybe other countries?
First of all, I didn't found it privately, but okay. I think the most surprising thing, or not surprising, but the most challenging thing I heard of when I joined the project was that the price, you don't have real prices from the Soviet time. It's just nonsense. I really wondered, how can you construct GDP without prices? Is that really possible? And then it turns out to be possible due to skilled research. As an economic historian, I knew that the Baltic states were about the level with at least Finland in the war period. I was not surprised by that. But it really, what surprised me a lot was that the Baltic states did so well when they were kept alone and nobody disturbed them with something. They did extremely well. Those are things I've really learned, and I also learned to work with very skilled scientists from different countries and extremely efficient scientists from the Baltic states. So I'm very impressed.
Thank you. I'll move now to Mr. Miezains. As an economic policymaker, what are your main conclusions when you see this data? I mean, how does that inform how we will be moving forward? The minister already said about Baltic integration. Are there any other things that you see here that would be important for us to keep in mind?
I think it only proves that our differences in our unfair advantages, every country has them, our unfair advantage, and we have them. and like comparison with Europe in the 1920s, where the specific growth was, we did something differently. We used our unfair advantage, we used our flexibility, and I know there's a historian here. It's like speaking with a fact checker sitting beside me, but I know many policies that were at that time, what I read from history books, are based on education. Smart people is one of the key things to have. Human capital is one of the key things to have, like innovation, to have this jump for the future industrialization, industry, and competitive industry. Not industry because we need something. We saw that in the Soviet times, so it's like planned economy. But when you combine your own country-specific or regional-specific unfair advantage with smart people and with capabilities, you will excel. You will climb up this ladder of prosperity. And one thing I understood, that I have been living all my life. I was born in 1988. I'm quite young. And I have been living all my life from one crisis to another crisis, and it shows me and proves that Latvian economy and past economic policies maybe have been with its faults. And we have been very dependent on single sectors. And this is something that many years ago I was very young and listening to TV, and we need economic structural reforms. And that was like a song in 2008, I think. And the reason is we need them because we need our economy like a spider with many legs. So these shocks that were shown in this historical graph wouldn't impact us as much. So we have more resilient economy. We have an easier way to move forward. If one leg breaks, you have another one. And this is something how currently in the Ministry of Economics we look at it. And when I go to the ministerials in the European Union, to the councils of ministers, I speak very loudly regarding that we can't only look at the big policies, like horizontal policies. We could see it here, like they didn't go off the gold standard and they had a stagnation period. But we need to allow and build the future of Europe and future of European single market on our differences. What can we do better than others? Or we have, I don't know, Spain, they have a lot of sun. So green hydrogen, solar panels, here you go. One of the things that we can't even compete with them because we have less sun. We can't change it. We have forests. And we have forests because of the policies that was implemented in 20s. Because after the World War in Latvia, I think we had forests around 30%, 27, 30%. And currently we have 53, 56. So that's the start of the policy. And why we have so many forests? And currently we have an unfair advantage again. So there are so many things given to us. Okay, peatlands, 10% of our entire land mass we have in our country. Again, unfair advantage. Because the other countries in Europe doesn't have it. Agricultural land, very good agricultural land. And in the data you showed that agriculture, even though the industry was growing, agriculture had a leading role. Why it is? Unfair advantage, because we have a very high quality agricultural land and we can use it and be more productive naturally. And when we implement technology and innovation, we can be even more productive, even better. And this is the thing how I look at these policies. Thank you.
Mr. Valainis, you mentioned resilience, and I wanted to ask the two researchers, Gatis and Adomas. You really have gotten into this data, deep into it. How do you explain the resilience of all three Baltic economies over this period after taking these incredible blows, the First World War, the Second World War, deportations, the collapse of the Soviet system? How do you explain the fact that these three countries are unique in their ability after each of these really, I think, often very severe events to recover and start growing again? Gatis, maybe I'll start with you and then ask Adomas. Maybe you have different ideas.
Okay, now yeah, but it was actually it was my biggest surprise when I looked to data, and then I learned and understood that after this geopolitical turbulence event, war or crisis, recovery was faster. And oh yeah, you remember half of a year ago we had this discussion in this. About this last 3 decades, and then one from our how we understood what can be solution, yeah, because our expectations now is much higher. Our feeling, yeah, we are in third place in Baltics and so, and this is somehow connected what we learned from data, because what was just our conclusion, we need more crisis, because after crisis, yeah, we're growing faster, yeah, and now we are in comfort zone of some middle incomes, yeah, policymakers, everyone. It's not so bad to make some deep change somewhere, some reforms, something, yeah, so to do something differently, because it's not so bad, yeah, and so and maybe, yeah, it's just one solution, yeah, to wait from something will happen, and then again, yeah, and you're totally right. Then if some problem, then we're more united, we can cooperate together. Baltic States, yeah, it was in this Popular Front's time, yeah, and so then we are together, yeah, if something's happening bad, so, but it's something very unique, yeah, in DNA of our nations, I can say something like that, yeah, and we're more patient, I think, yeah, and because we learn from history. My grandmother, when he returned from Siberia, and I was child, and then she told me, you know, it was not so bad, because in my own farm I worked much harder, yeah, and so we are optimists, yeah, and we somehow, yes, and then I think another thing maybe is this, yes, this like surviving skills, something like that, yeah, surviving skills, because we had everything, yeah, this totalitarian, how to improvise, how to survive, how to find food in Soviet period, yeah, with empty shops, yeah, but everyone had something, yeah, there, yeah, and if I try to tell this and explain to my children, they look to me like a crazy person, yeah, but how it's possible if you have money, yeah, but you cannot buy something, yeah, how it's possible, yeah, and so I think this can be that we just, because of these historical events, yeah, we survived several monetary reforms, yeah, inflation, everything. We had 12 currencies in 100 years, at least 12 currencies, and only from my perspective, last monetary reform, when we went from this national currency lot to euro, was more or less a coin. Other is very big challenge for society, yeah. So we are prepared for such situations. Then we mobilize ourselves somehow, yeah, and then we can survive, and then it's somehow motivation for us to do more, yeah. It's not some logical and data-based explanation now, yeah. But another thing that I should mention here, what was one from my surprise, yeah, it was that really now I'm looking more and more to this period of 80s and 90s for like a one period, yeah. And already this crisis started with this collapse of supply chains and this and financial system already in 80s, and just because of our independence, yeah, we managed to do this faster, yeah, to overcome this crisis. So it was in middle, but it's not some, and this we should explain for general public, that it's not because we recreated our independent countries, because that everything collapsed, yeah. It started already before. This is really important. Another thing is, of course, how much we should already, of course, we're happy for this data about GDP, but we should explain this Soviet economic period, yeah. Explain that it was unique situation in Baltic, yeah, that we produced a lot of things, yeah, it was a lot of production, yeah, but it was not like in we discussed in Bergen, yeah, it was your question that, so you produced more, but it was worse for your population, yeah, it's not normally for normal country, yeah. Yeah, and it's it's very big controversy, yeah. But it was a real situation, yeah. So this is just my introduction, yeah. But really interesting. And each day I wake up and look to data, and I look to and how we doing this together. In my humble opinion, we're doing this together, yeah. We're changing our minds and so on, and yeah, it's really interesting, yeah. It's not finished, yeah. It's not not finished yet.
We'll talk about future research opportunities in a bit, but I want Adomas, how do you explain this resilience of the three Baltic states?
Paldies. For me, it's probably one single thing is that the Baltics always felt different in whatever historical stage they were, whether they were part of the Tsarist Empire, whether they were independent, whether they were part of the Soviet Empire, or now independent. It always felt like we are not the same as our neighbors, and when you feel like you're not the same part of some huge group, you feel a responsibility for the territory you live in to look for better future different from the region that you're forcibly or not attached to. And that makes you think, okay, which direction should I take? And the Baltics consistently looked at the West, always towards the West, whether it was interwar, whether it was the end of the Soviet Union, even at the beginning of the Soviet occupation, still the partisans fighting in the forest, they appealed for the West. Today, we look at the West, we want to converge to the West, and the fact that we look at them, we try to be like them, we try to pursue policies that bring us closer, even though those policies might be unique, to bring us closer to a better standard. So I think that drove our policies forward all the way.
Okay. What I'm hearing here, and I think something that would resonate with a lot of people also in the audience in Latvia, is that there's a fairly cultural explanation for this. Now, I'm going to put on my little scholarly hat and remember that when I was in college I read Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which is the classic text, of course, of culture as being the matrix within which determines economic development. But at the same time, it's problematic. I mean, Weber said, yes, the Protestants, but we see now that in his home country of Germany, it's the Catholic parts of the country, Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, that are the richest. Yeah. So it's difficult sometimes to get a grasp on how culture influences economics and how do you do that. And I'll ask Ola, who's a professor of economic history and maybe has a broader view of all this. I mean, did you see that cultural impact in this data? And if so, how do we get that out in numbers rather than just in these stories that we tell ourselves?
Well, if you're talking about Weber, I can continue about that. So I think it's very clear that in the Baltic states, historically, the Protestants were the wealthy. Mm-hmm. You can see the example of Latgale, which still is lagging behind, far behind.
Lithuania, a very Catholic country, has now rushed ahead. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
But only in the recent decades.
Yeah, but it's a historical explanation. Yeah. And it doesn't apply for rich countries today. It applies for poor countries today, but not rich countries today. I think that's very clear. My big question is why has that to do with culture? Why has Latvia performed inferior to the two other Baltic states the last decades? To me, that's not easy to explain. I really think somebody should look closely and carefully into that and to explain. If it's a goal here in Latvia to have economic growth of 5%, well, that's extremely high these days. So, but what's the problem in Latvia really? That's one thing I really have been thinking about. And if somebody comes up with a project about that, I would be happy to join.
Oh yes, maybe you have some kind of ideas about this, and just to add a different maybe view of this, I think one of the things that I'd be very interested in looking at in this data is differences of economic structure, because I think it's quite clear that despite the fact that the level of development was fairly similar up until 86 or so for the 3 Baltic states. The structures that the Soviet Union created here were quite different. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Ojārs can, well, more heavy industry, perhaps more sort of all union. We saw the differences in Latgale and Kurzeme for pigs and things like the regional stuff like that. So maybe, Ojārs, maybe you have something to say about this.
If I may, just one moment about resilience. And I'm looking to Professor Mesh, and I'm not sure that we are so resilient, because what that got shown in the first slide is population. And population is very similar in Latvia, for example, and in Finland. But now it's 2 times or 2.5 times bigger in Finland. And of course, it's why we lose lot of population. And as well, in the recent years, our population, of course, it is reasons are declining. And no, yes. And economic and one more about the forest. Yes, in Soviet times, the Soviet propaganda is very happy that in Soviet times the hectares or volumes of forest very much increase. Okay, but if you look what happens with agriculture land, that agriculture land is decrease. And it's because the most capable farmers sent to Siberia, and this agriculture land become the forest. That is big explanation. Now, I agree that if we compare Baltic states, they similar, but of course that devil is in details. And I not so that it's in Soviet time different structure, but let's say a role of Riga. For Latvia, Riga is the biggest country in the north of former Russian Empire, and best years as well, according to your statistics, is when Riga is the engine of growth in Latvia and in Baltics, and it was where industry is and where the biggest research is, and so on. But as well, after Soviet times, and that is a difference, that Riga is as well the capital or center of so-called Baltic economic region, and as well Baltic military region, Baltic railroads, Baltic whatever, all. And that brings a lot of people here, but not that is have an economic volume. It has as well changed the structure. And after, in the last 50 years, more or less, if we're looking to Vilnius, to Tallinn, and Vilnius grow faster than Riga in the last years, government and central government and capital working together, bringing investments, and they are succeed. In Latvia, maybe, I hope it's some changes in the last years, when I know one political party have a prime minister and mayor of Riga, but previous years it's constant struggle between the, if you must do something in Riga, you need the government and Riga authorities. You can't do it alone. No, yes. And for Estonia, the biggest growth, it's immediately, if we compare with other countries, immediately at beginning of 90s. I think they make a very smart decision that after the August coup, they get a new government very quickly, and Martlar government, and they started structural reforms nearly immediately. We followed them, but nearly one year later. And this 1 year, because it's, yeah, but this is probably the different story. But additional, how it happened that after crisis of 2008, Lithuania become now the leader. We have some ideas and some research, but I think it's still important to look to this. One is that we are all three hit, probably Latvia harder by 2008 crisis, but difference is that we have a help from IMF with some restrictions, and we get money for lower rates. Lithuania get the money in the open market for higher rates, but quicker pay back. I think it's interesting to look to that. Yeah.
Mr. Milzainis, do you have an answer for all about
what is
Latvia's
like problematic
not
questions?
Not quite as rapid growth in the last couple of decades?
I would say currently we are paying quite a big price for solutions that were economic quick fixes. For example, of course, it's not bad. It's not bad when country has their own ambition, but it sometimes raises like economic dependencies. Like before 2008, the Baltic Tiger, the real estate development, banking sector, boom. It's a bubble. You know, the free market has bubbles. And we had one, and it hurt. After that, what are we doing? And I remember we must be the banking center of the safest place, like the new Swiss, and we saved the banks, we saved the investors at 2008, so we are what? Economic capital of Baltics. Boom, money wall. And we're paying the price. Transit dependencies on transit routes. When you look at the broader picture, the transit business with Russia has declined in the past more than 10 years. And that's not because of our decisions, and that's because they decided, basically. They decided that they will operate their own ports, their own infrastructure, and currently we have an economic challenge to resolve it, and I think we're on the way to do it. And again, we are looking at the future-proofing of our industries and looking at, I'm really learning from the 1920s. I really do. And for example, it's not the Soviet times when the trees grew. It was 1920s policies that made Latvia's wealth measure. And that's why we have so many forests. Of course, it's something to do with the plant economy, and they didn't think that they're valuable, but good for us now. So, yeah, and again, in 1920s, there was a book written by Kārlis Skalbe, and it's called, it was written, I think, in 1919 or 1920. Kārlis Skalbe. It reads very strange for modern Latvian, pat dzimtenes ceļiem. And I have one copy of it, and it's the original. And he describes how Latvia looked when he visited different regions. And basically in that book there's that answer, right? Regionally there were differences. And he went to Latgale, and he said, Latgale is a region with huge potential. We have to unlock it because of their history before the 1920s and how it was not keeping up a bit with the rest of the territory. But they had a plan and they did it. And again, the policies that were implemented in the 1920s regarding education, they were one of the biggest keys. And we saw that, like the Latgale region as well, growing up and like raising higher in the development and GDP. So, no, that was pigs, yes, livestock. That graph was that. So, if we learn from those times and modernize the view, we have the solution. Let's go into the modern technologies, Green Deal, develop everything that's possible using our unfair advantages, wind, sun as much as we can, water, hydrogen, etc., etc. Let's use our bioeconomy, the strong point of our natural gifts that has been given to us, forests, peatlands, farmlands, etc., and industry on top to add value to grow the GDP.
Okay. Before I open the floor for questions, I want to give it.
Very short remark. What Ojārs already mentioned. It's important, of course, GDP per capita, but it's very important this critical mass of people. What we covering our territory is just one example, and I can continue what you started to think about, that we need more technologies, and what we need for more technologies, we need more smart people, people with entrepreneurial mindset, Probably in Lithuania are more people with entrepreneurial mindset, because Lithuanian state-owned companies for sure are more aggressive in international markets, Our Latvian forest, Latvian valsts measure, Latvian ergo, they're dreaming. They are here, only in Latvia with so huge potential to go in international market to do more in this, They are only sitting here for decades and waiting something because they are here in comfort zone, They are controlling this and so, and I think this is why Lithuania really achieved more in this last, after this last crisis, because this was time before from 1994 to 2008, it was similar graphs, But this number of people, for example, if we look just to square kilometers in Benelux countries, there 40 times more scientists to square kilometer than in Latvia. When Gatis Krūmiņš, 40 scientists in Belgium, Of course, in Germany, 25, 30 times more. And this is about critical mass of people, So we should try somehow change this, this balance, in our population. We should more really, through education system, through everything, we just need more, proportionally more people, smart people, and with entrepreneurial mindset. This is my solution. How we can?
We need more people. We need more families. We need more children.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the policy sectors that we have to look into very strongly, and all of the Baltics together currently, because this is something that's worrying me.
Or robots, and we can replace in symphony orchestra 1/3, from robots, violins can play robots and so, but it will be a solution, because if we will ignore some technological changes, they will not ignore us, In agriculture, will be only robots after 10, 20 years, if we'll not will.
We have the leading specialist on demography here sitting in the second row in Latvia. But before, as I said, before we move to the questions, Adomas, Olis said what he would be interested in doing further research on. What are you interested in doing with the data and to find out more things? What are the big questions that are on your mind after having done this research?
Well, this research is not finished in my view because I'm still writing my thesis. So you heard a lot about interwar period because this is, I've already have the data. I managed to analyze interwar period thoroughly, but the Soviet period and modern period I still have to work on, and my deadline is in autumn, which means that some of the questions that Ola has raised might be answered in a concise way, at least, by that time. But afterwards, probably I will search for opportunities for a postdoc and look into some deeper statistics. And probably trade would be one of the things, because it got me into this in the first place, because I thought that Lithuania had a golden age in the interwar period because of the export of those bacons and stuff. And I found out how miserable it was afterwards. And then I expected the same thing from Latvia and Estonia, and it turns out Latvia and Estonia were success stories. So analyzing these reasons deeper, I think, is definitely a future thing. And also, what we heard before is applying these measures for future policy recommendations.
Okay.
Please do advise us.
So, questions. Ambassador, if we could get a microphone to...
Erik Marmi, Estonian ambassador. Good to hear you all, and it's fascinating data. What bothers me, and I want to get back to that, and probably our Lithuanian friend can tell us, we can't get back to that graphic of data, but the Soviet time after war, 45, 75, the increase of GDP, and then you have a stagnation for 15 years and then a collapse again. This is exactly the rhetoric that Moscow is using, that the Soviet Union brought us prosperity. And your data kind of supports that. Now, I'm old enough to grow up at that time. My parents were teachers. They both made 80 rubles per head, okay? They were part of intelligentsia. They couldn't get the apartment from the state. So their parents had to pay for the so-called cooperative. I wonder, how do you transfer that GDP growth to the real, living standard? And you said there is a difference, but you can't use that data if you can't compare. And I agree totally with the Norwegian view on this, that you kind of agree that you can put that data together, and that surprised you. I'm surprised that you can use that data in a way that I didn't see that, when I talked to my grandparents in 70s, they said, yeah, well, don't listen to what they tell you at school, we tell you how did we live in 30s. All right. It was a massive, massive, decline in living standards. So that data is, in that sense, okay, maybe in the countryside you had these collective farms and the people lived better. Now look what is the result of that? I mean, you go outside 30 kilometers from Riga and you still have these, crumbling collective farmhouses all over the place. Pigs, yes. I visited Valmiera, the meat factory, which is now transferred to the economic sort of zone. This is incredible what Valmiera is doing with that. But that meat, I mean, the mayor said all that meat went out. So Valmiera had no issue with those sausages that were produced. They all went to St. Petersburg. So can you kind of, I'm a little worried about that when you come out with this data, this will be used by Moscow saying, well, exactly what we have told you for 30 years, that we brought you prosperity.
Okay. Adomas, how do you answer this? How do you avoid becoming a tool in Moscow's info wars?
Look, so first of all, there was growth for sure, because what we have a robust figure in 1990s. We know how successful or how wealthy we were in the 90s, which was already market economy, not Soviet Union anymore. So that figure is robust and clear. We also have the interwar period. We have that figure clear and robust. So somehow you need to connect that data, and apparently the living standard that we have in the 90s is still much higher than it was in the interwar period, which means that that difference was achieved still during the Soviet period. So you cannot disregard the fact that living standards were still improving. I mean, people in the countryside definitely lived better off in the late 1960s than in the early 1920s or so. That's a fact. But the second thing, and I think most important thing, is that...
Not in late 1930s. You can't compare that to the
no, still,
1920s. Of course, it was
even in the 90s. People in 1995 lived 3 times better than people in 1939. And that's already comparing markets data.
So I don't buy that. I don't buy that. It's,
because the whole world was advancing. It was the golden age of growth for all of the world, all of the industry after the Second World War. The thing is, if you want to compare this data without any propaganda issues, you have to look at what growth was achieved by Finland, what growth was achieved by Norway, what growth was achieved by the other Western countries, and then you see that maybe in the first years of the Soviet occupation, there is similar growth in productivity, first of all, but then from 1970s, everything stops. And that is the inherent flaw of the Soviet occupational system, is that the growth eventually stops.
Very, very short comment. Yes, you're totally right about that, that we should explain this, yeah? But we cannot ignore the data, yeah, what already Adomas mentioned, because we know that we produced a lot of things, yeah? But for example, then we should connect this with my research, because in my research we see that at least 1/5 from all incomes, yeah? If we look to financial incomes, we straight away, from this turnover tax, 90% went directly to the Soviet central budget, yeah? Of course, we not only can speak about sausages, but in monetary, yeah? If we speak about financial system, it was very connected, yeah? They used our territory, our people, yeah? And it was really worse for us, yeah, that they produced something here, yeah? But of course, but we cannot ignore that and some international methodology that in territory of 3 Baltic countries we produced a lot of things. And this is unique situation, but we cannot just, what was, I think, no, situation is better because we did research and we will publish this, but before it was really empty places, yeah, but we didn't know. And then Russia can use this more because then they can create their own estimation, something like that. But we have our data, we explain what happened, and I agree. Next step should be with calculating loss of Soviet occupation, yeah, what we are already doing here in Latvia, and I hope Estonia and Lithuania will join us, yeah, together with new methodology, analyze this Soviet period, and maybe go to international court to ask for compensation. Why not? Yeah, because this is really important for us, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I understand the ambassador's comments very well. It's a very good remark, and I think there's a lot of truth in it. Also, I think that there's truth in the calculations, but of course, when you export a lot of things from the Baltic States to Russia, and you don't get paid for it, it's a problem. So you have to measure the standard of living also, not only GDP, because there's a huge difference. So, and how can you measure the standard of living? Wages are probably way meaningless because you had a lot of money, but you didn't have products. So I think that a way to measure the standard of living is consumption. What was the consumption? What was the so of course one needs to do that, and I think it would be amazing to see the difference between growth of consumption and growth of GDP. That would be extremely interesting.
Can you get that data, that comparison out of this data?
Yes, that would change. That's for the next 2 years.
You can add a small comment.
Very, very short comment. You understand what we did achieve for 1 million, yeah? If you will help us with funding, no problems, yeah? Yeah, but you know inflation rate, yeah? 1 million 3 years ago, it was different, yeah?
But for my part, the thing is, the GDP per capita doesn't always represent the actual situation. And we know in the European Union currently as well, there is one country which doesn't measure any more GDP, and it's Ireland. Ireland uses different number, and it's because of this reason that GDP doesn't always represent the standard of living, or its increase is based on situation where the money is brought away with very less of taxation inside of the country, like for the second term of turnover of the same money. So GDP is only a number, and of course, regarding the calculation, we have to look at this data in the history to understand better what the Soviet Union did to us, and how come I, who have been born in the last finishing years of that monstrosity, I have lived through everything, through 90s. When in 1990, I think the wage was 5 lats a month. Afterwards, it was like 50 lats a month, like the minimum wage. And how we, as a country, as a nation, and as Baltic nations, advanced, got back where we were and excelled. We are free countries. We are very important national countries, and we are a part of European Union. And really, currently, I don't care what Russia will say. They damaged my country. And I'm angry for that. But the future is what we have to look forward. And we have to find the best ways how to excel even more, how to be the best, and how to give the right ambition for our economic growth. And I think we can join our forces with Estonia, with Lithuania to do it and really achieve it. Thank you. I'm sorry, it was quite emotional.
Okay, this is interesting because, you know, we think of economics as being about cold, hard, rational numbers, but you can get quite emotional about a graph, apparently. A question over there, yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Viktors Valainis. I'm a professor at the Professor Emeritus at the University of Latvia. We've been sort of dancing around. I assume that your GDP, because you're so defensive of the Soviet figures, is based on productivity. Is the interwar period also based on productivity?
Yes.
And now it's based on productivity. So
post-1995 is from all three sides: income, value added, and consumption. So the most reliable data is, of course,
yeah. And that's why you get the difference between the figures for the Soviet Union, or Soviet time, and what it was like to live there. And you're going to have that all the time, unless, because you can't use income, because you can't use prices. So that was my problem when I was looking at this problem, was how to massage the Soviet figures of material production so that it comes out somewhere close to GDP. And it was very difficult. The CIA spent 50 years trying to do it and didn't get it right either. I know, because I was in the National Archives in Washington. But essentially, you need to make that clear, that you're not looking at income and you're not looking at consumption, you're looking at productivity. And if productivity, all you need for productivity, of course, is to have a few factories and produce something. Have a few collective farms and produce something, you know? Then you need to put it in context, that's all I'm saying. You need to be very careful and put it in context, especially if you're going to try and sell it to the Baltic States. The West doesn't care, and the East will do what it likes with it anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with this point. And in the next few years, as Gatis mentioned, if there's financing, the plan is to calculate the GDPs of the Baltic states at the so-called adjusted factor cost, which is the American method of calculating the whole Soviet Union's consumption side GDP. So that will show a better picture of what the standard of living was, but the fact is that the productivity of an average Baltic person was obviously higher than the productivity of average USSR, citizen or Russian one. So still, if the Baltics were, as Ulla said, left alone during the Cold War period, all of that productivity that you saw in the graphs would have translated into living standards. But I agree that it has to be made clear, yes.
But I assume that it's, if you're going so in the details, that even more complicated. This is absolutely clear that GDP don't have a clear correlation with living standards. This is just, you must accept it. That is, and especially in Soviet time, but not only. It's, but I think it makes even more complicated. If you look into volumes and productivity, it's not count enough, in my opinion, quality, because the market economy is tend to produce quality. The Soviet system is tend to produce quantity, and you can produce. We remember it for a cup of the coffee. Coffee costs 20 times less in Latvia than in Sweden in the 90s, but the quality as well is very different. And I don't have, I hope that you will have answers to that. But as well, okay, Abrams and Leopards are much more capable, at least I think, I hope, than some Soviet tanks. But they are, of course, as well, much more expensive. But maybe this is not the best example, because what is the life on the battlefield, and how you can evaluate the quality with productivity? I simply think that to compare absolutely different systems, it's it's very difficult, and it's not lost aside.
Okay, and a very short comment that it's possible to do because in this project we did research and we understood there are a lot of data about Soviet occupation period. Soviets did a lot of research, analyzed situation in countryside, in different regions, in small place, in families, what they can buy, how much they money have. Just, of course, we need time and resources to do this. And this is really possible to do, research, and then we will explain this real situation, And this and quality issue, everything, they analyzed, but of course it was secret information, and of course nobody showed this for audience because it just showed that's how bad is the real situation for society, So this is important.
Salesperson.
From my part, best of luck calculating the truth amounts of goods produced, because we all know that in Soviet Union there was like this 5-year plan, and everyone rolled up like 20% 1 year, 30% on top of the 20% previously, and at the end of the day, where is everything? So this will be, I think, a challenge, because I have seen this in real statistics in Latvia in one sector regarding the extracted amounts. And I look currently like people with shovels did amounts unimaginable, impossible. But in the statistical data they have it, so currently the scientists are measuring the changes in the amount of the earth, the levels, just to calculate approximately what was the right amount of the product produced there. So best of luck to you both.
Okay, we're coming to the end. I think we have time for one more question, if somebody has a question. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathleen Riguer, and Obviously, I'm the only Asian in the room, so the question might be a little interesting. Asia has a very different systems, everything from Europe. So I have been witnessing personally the differences in a way since 2022. When I first came here, so different from what I have read, from what I have learned, from what I have watched about European systems. But there's one thing that I'm thinking. Because you're a rich society in general compared to developing countries like Asia, most of Asia. But one of the issues that I'm seeing is how can because you have a relatively smaller population than Asia, and although we have problems when it comes to poverty and corruption in Asia, the thing is your population is kind of lower than Asia, right? How do you address, because the population is a big driving factor when we talk about GDP, economics and all these things. So how do you think you would be able to address the population, which is, in general, the birth rate is decreasing, right? But how would you address the population problem, do you think, at least?
Yeah, Mr. Valainis already said that we have to do that, but maybe does somebody have a solution to this?
Yes, of course. Yes, you're totally right. We have no less population what we have in the beginning of 20th century. Yeah, in Latvia. Yeah, in Lithuania more or less the same. But technologies already are helping us to do this. Yeah, to manage this with such old and low number of population. Yeah, but what we can do, I believe in technologies. Yeah, robots really will replace people. Yeah, and fortunately, or for fortune, we can do.
I think, yes, robots can do things. That's correct. But if you look to Scandinavian countries and Western European countries, North America, the huge problem is that productivity growth is getting lower and lower and lower. It's not increasing, it's getting lower and lower. We really need productivity growth to increase rapidly and significantly in order to, for example, pay pensions. So our pension schemes are not functioning because productivity growth is not going up. Why is not productivity growth going up? Well, there are probably different reasons. One explanation is that we have to put so many people into health and care, and the productivity growth there is not high at all. So there is a huge demographic problem. And I think the demographic problem in the Baltic States is extremely high, and I think that in some years you will really feel it.
Mr. Valainis, this will be the conclusion.
Very short answer. And this is a bit with a touch of humor. There's an option to help us. You have to find a Latvian husband. So, but in the real life, of course, the policies have impact, and we have a lot to do regarding demographic policies, and for the younger generation to understand that there is a future for them and there's a safety net for them as well. And currently the Ministry of Economics is working on housing policies for new specialists for families, because without them, I understand the economic choices for the new families, and they are hard. And we are doing as much as we can, and I hope we will do more, but you can help us in this battle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Valainis. With that, we will conclude. I think this has been an incredibly fascinating discussion, amazing amount of information that we have learned. I come away with this actually with a very hopeful feeling, because first of all, I see that we can move ahead and understand our past better to really get into what happened, which helps us to think about what we have to do in the future. But the second thing is obviously that we see that in this Baltic region, we can be complaining about the fact that, okay, Latvian growth in the last couple of years hasn't been as high as we would like it, or that, about other things that don't really satisfy us, but we see that we have an incredible, collectively, all three countries are incredibly resilient, are quite capable of overcoming very, very, very difficult circumstances and to continue developing. And I think that if we take that away from this historical lesson, I think that will give us a good boost for developing in the future as well. Thank you very much for everybody who was watching. Thank you very much for everybody who participated. Thank you for this panel. And, you know, on to new victories of research. What I wanted to say about the different economic...
Okay, if you have interest for this, jūs jau beidzāt tie? You can join our translation tomorrow. Tomorrow from 10 in Valmiera, you can go to Valmiera and listening us, watching in our TV. So just, we will continue this discussion tomorrow. Thank you.